Hey, welcome back to another Black City coffee vlog. In this video, we're gonna do a little bit of a lightning round, but not that fast, Q&A with my new friend, Chris. So instead of me blabbing on about who Chris is, he can explain himself. All right, take it away, Chris.
Hi, Meg. Thanks for taking the time to answer these questions. I hope you're on the path to a speedy recovery. Seeing you making videos again and seeing you roasting again is awesome to see. So thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions.
Thank you for taking the time to create a magnificent set. I always try to do that and always semi-fail, so that looks beautiful. All right, I'm excited to see what this is about. All right, Chris.
A little bit about me. So I've been around the specialty coffee industry for 10 plus years. And when I say around, I mean just working on brewing methods, finding really great coffees, making exceptional cups of coffee. And I've really avoided roasting to the largest extent possible up until recently, where went off the deep end, got a Hottop, got artisan, and started trying to roast. And so that's where I came upon you and your videos, and they've been immensely helpful. And so whenever I have a problem, I sort of say, like, well, what would Meg do? And so that's sort of where this came about, and I really appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions. One interesting fact about my roasting is that I am roasting at an elevation of 5,100 feet above sea level. So that makes things a little bit more challenging and a little bit more interesting. So typical numbers that you might see on a Hottop, like charge at 380, 100% heat, those things just don't work. I get maybe 6-minute roasts if I do those kinds of numbers. So almost everything I do when I approach roasting is really viewed through that lens of, let's not scorch the beans, let's get a nice 10-minute roast time, things like that. So again, some of these are elevation related, or are you seeing what I'm seeing? Again, thank you.
All right, interesting. Okay. Let's see. First question.
First one. So if you see bad profile data, or if you see bad curves, like your rate of rise is garbage, do you even bother drinking that? Or do you even bother cupping it? Or do you just sort of throw it away?
Okay, good question. Bad ROR, bad data, an ROR that's unmanaged, basically. It's basically an ROR that's not what we call, like in Rouse terms, shall always be descending, is what most coffee roasters are, I think, used to, and that's the school of thought that we're coming from. When we have an ROR that is maybe going all over the place, it pre-tells of a coffee or a cup that is probably gonna not be as good. Maybe not be expressed the origin in the coffee as well as it should be. So the heat was managed basically improperly. And that could be a number of factors as to what that problem was. It could be user error, machine error, probe error. So probes, like maybe it's not even placed in the right place of the drum, so that you couldn't make the right decision as a roaster. So there's many things. If we're dealing with the Hottop specifically, we would have to look that up in terms of where the bean probe is placed, but I think it was placed in a spot that was at the bottom of the drum, and I think that's the biggest deal. It's like, is it at the top of the drum? That wouldn't make sense, but it's been done, and the bean probe is, I think, in the Hottop at the bottom of the drum or near the bottom of the drum, where beans would actually be located in the drum rotating. Okay, that's just to give ourselves context for this answer. So if I'm getting bad data, I always want to make sure I cup it first. If it's really bad, that's probably telling me as a roaster as I'm going into the cupping table. But if I'm new to cupping, I should probably taste it and just see what the difference is. Maybe I want to see what baked looks like, or what the data is, and then match it to what that cup tastes like. So for example, if I have an ROR that's sort of like convex, in its graph, it's in its like progression down the tail. If it's kind of like convex like that, I would want to know, just for knowing sake, like what that tastes like. It probably tastes really underdeveloped, right? Probably tastes stale and hollow and things like that. But as a roaster and as a cupper who would be checking back and trying to check my work, I would want to know what that defect would taste like. Now, so in that sense, I wouldn't throw it out. I would use it as a learning place to learn, basically. So there's always something to learn, and we don't want to stop just at the data. The data can only tell us so much. Really what matters, and I think what everybody in coffee says right now currently, is like, what's in the cup. What matters is what's in the cup. And we can have, even Rouse says, we can have really perfect data, but sometimes when we taste it in the cup, maybe it's still bland, maybe it's still hollow, maybe it's still X, right? So always, always, always cup. I wouldn't throw it out just yet. Next question.
This is sort of somewhat Hottop and somewhat could be elevation related. I'm seeing a pretty consistent crash after turning point, and I don't know if that's Hottop or elevation. I have tried everything. I've tried max heat at 100%. I've tried air to kind of smooth things out. I've tried charging higher. I've tried charging lower. I've tried almost everything, and I get a consistent crash almost after the turning point. Some beans I can smooth it out, and the crash isn't so pronounced, but it's pretty consistent. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, a crash after turning point, meaning we're having a loss of heat in the drum. It's kind of hard to give an answer on this, given that, one, you said you tried everything, but two, I don't know what kind of beans you're working with. And I know that the Hottop is just sort of limited in its management of heat. Like the smaller machine that you get, the smaller a machine gets, the more volatile it becomes. And so management of heat is quite difficult. I would want to caution you, or I would want to maybe suggest or something. I don't know the full picture now. And it would be, and maybe we'll go back and forth on the email with this, but what is the batch size? I don't think you mentioned batch size. Let me go back. Okay, yeah. What is the Hottop? I know it can't run a full capacity charge. It just can't. It doesn't have the power to do that. Versus, say, my Mill City roaster can run a full capacity charge because it has like 20,000 BTUs. It's very powerful. But the Hottop, one, it's electric. That means it's not going to have the type of responsiveness that a gas roaster has. And you can read up on that and stuff like that. But that's why I was like, oh, I really got to get to a gas roaster, because I just know I just know that as a roaster, I would want my machine to respond as quickly as I would want it to. So like, oh, I need heat now. Like, I want heat now. I don't want to have to calculate in delays and stuff like that. Hottops, as I remember, there's going to be a delay because there's an electric coil that is heating the drum, and that takes time to heat up, versus when you can just crank the gas in a gas-powered machine and then boom, you've got, much less delay. Maybe there is delay if we start, really measuring stuff, but a much less delay in terms of heat application onto the drum. It's also going to be less stable too because it's a single wall drum. So the way that it's also retaining heat is not as efficient as, say, a double wall drum, which that's again another reason why I picked the Mill City roaster. I would check to see the batch size. Let me know what your batch size is. I know I was running about 75% capacity charges. And then what kind of beans are you using? Are they really high elevation, and maybe this machine just can't provide enough energy to heat these beans in a way, or roast these beans in a way that would be more stable? It was really hard for me because of the heat management and the limitations of the Hottop. I was like, I'm just going to stick to not a too high elevation coffee. I'm going to stick to maybe, like, in terms of elevation, I would stick to something like 1,600 meters in elevation or something like that. You said that you're, you've charged high and you've charged low, but I would really like to know what those numbers are. Does high mean 400 or is it 380? Is low mean 350 or 375? Like, what is your low and what is your high? And then maybe I can give a little bit more insight. I think you did provide me some screenshots, so let me take a look. So we have, what is this, like a 1 minute soak? Yep, 1 minute. You're doing a 1 minute soak, and then back up to, and then I guess it's full power here, but we're not getting enough energy. And why are we lowering gas here? So typically I do not lower the gas until about 300 degrees Fahrenheit, around there. And it could be before or after you hit green to yellow or dry end phase. So your dry end is at 440, yeah. So it just feels like you've lowered the gas too early, and that's why you're getting this crash. So try that first. Also, try to change one thing at a time, okay? Change one thing at a time. You're gonna run through some coffee, but change one thing at a time. So yeah, I would look at that gas setting. Don't touch gas. Don't touch your gas until like 300 degrees. And then start to lower it. And how much to lower it? Maybe like 80%, 75%. Play around with that number. But I think you're decreasing your gas prematurely, that's all. Okay? And then I would try to develop your coffee a little bit more here. Okay, next.
Okay, so this next one is Hottop related. At the end of your Hottop run, again, I know you're on the Mill City 1 kg, being all fancy, but at the end of your Hottop run, how much green were you putting in the roaster at a time? Right now, I've sort of settled on 150 grams. Should I go higher, lower? What did you see? Where did you get the best results? Again, any help is appreciated.
Okay, my batch size. What is the batch size, the total batch size of the Hottop? I need to write this down because I get this question all the time and I always forget. Batch size. I think by the time I was done roasting with the Hottop, I was roasting a 75%, 70 to 75% batch size. And that's because that was recommended to me in some book that I read. One of these books. One of these books or one of the blogs that I read, I don't remember. When you're reading, you just get really voracious. You start consuming everything. But I remember it was 70 to 75%. Now that you will have to, because of your very unique situation, have to see what the best one is for you. If you're having trouble managing heat, I would say lower the batch size, right? Because if you make the batch size larger, you're not really helping the machine out in any way because you're just making its job harder. So if you're still having trouble managing heat and having a smooth declining ROR, I would make the batch size smaller. So I would say start from there, start from like 75% and then maybe go down to 70% and see what's up with that. Okay, and again, I want you to really like change one thing at a time, write down your results, change another thing, write down your results, and try to, like what was said to me, nail one thing at a time. Nail one thing at a time. Otherwise, you don't know what the problem is and you can't diagnose. I think a big thing about a roaster is really knowing all the little parts and seeing how they all work together so that through the years, you really can build a roadmap to problems that can happen and arise, and that you could much easier find out where the problem is. Okay, next.
Next up, when are you cupping these days? Are you still cupping 24 hours after? Do you wait 36? Do you see how that coffee develops over a certain amount of time? Would love to know.
Okay, with cupping, it depends on a couple of things. So if I have a new green, totally haven't cupped it before, I wait a full 24 hours because that's standard. If I have a green that I'm trying to nail or I'm trying to do a little bit better at, or I'm like, okay, I know it's decent, but now I know I have some new information. I want to take this coffee to another level, and I think I have. Then I will sort of be a little bit in a hurry to cup. And I've read in Rayo's book that you can sort of accelerate that wait time process. So depending on, personal schedule and all stuff like that, I never like to wait beyond 24 hours because then I mentally feel like my coffee's getting more stale and I'm not able to judge the coffee at the correct time. So I never wait beyond 24 if I'm trying to cup notes that I'm trying to market. Like, oh cool, I have this new coffee. I'm gonna wait 24 hours, let it rest. I'm gonna cup it. I'm gonna really try to write down all of the notes and everything like that, and that's what's going to go on the label, that sort of thing, that sort of vibe. Now for experimentation purposes and maybe to get inside the mind of my consumer, I'll be like, oh, it takes like 5 days, maybe 7 days for a coffee to get to them. How does this taste at that point? And if I'm still satisfied with that because I've developed the coffee so well, right, granted, then I would just want to know what that is. So maybe I could take that information and use that in marketing and stuff like that. But as a standard, I'm waiting 24 hours and then I cup them. If I want to accelerate the process like I was telling you about, I will probably, what Rayo said, is just grind your sample to cup, which is 10 to 12 grams. So I would grind my sample and I'd wait 40 minutes and then try to cup it then. So if I was kind of like in a hurry, which is not ideal, but he finds that that's helpful for him as he goes on and does and consults everybody, right? And you have the book there, you've read it. So I thought you would kind of know that. And that's where I get my information, okay? Okay, next. I guess you were asking just personally, what do I do? I try to always work off from a standard. And then for whatever reason, if life happens to me, if I'm being impatient or if I'm being experimental, I'd always want to do something on purpose. I'd always want to do something not just out of the blue, because I wouldn't really be helping myself out in terms of building really good systems. All right, so I hope that's a better answer.
This is a fun one, especially as I think about moving from the Hottop to another bigger machine. Did you ever consider electric? I think electric gets a bad rap because of the slow ramp up and ramp down times, but there's some environmental things that are nice about it. I know Gießen has the W1, the W6. Those are both all electric. Was that ever in the cards for you as you were considering your next big roaster?
Yes, it was. Electric was still a big part of my consideration because Baymore, you remember Baymore when they were going to put out their 1 kg and that was all electric, and it never came to fruition, but it looked like a sick machine. It had the cooling trays and all like that. It looked like a real roaster. That was important to me, right? Like if you've seen any of my videos about that, it was like aesthetics was important to me. And in the end, I was like, I just want power. I wasn't really thinking as a roaster. At the time, I wasn't really thinking as a roaster yet because I wasn't a real roaster yet. I was an aspiring roaster, and I still would classify myself as an aspiring roaster. So at the time, with all the information that I had, and I love the fact that electric could just it's electric. You just plug it in. I don't have to get propane. I don't have to hook up to natural gas. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It just seemed easier. So I was really turned on, and I think that if Baymore had released their electric, it was called Jake or something like that, like a weird name. I think I would have gone for it because it was cheaper too, right? And I'm like, did I really want to spend $7,000 when I had no profit, when I had no real reason to put in that much money? But in the end, I was like, I started to think about the future a little bit. And I started to think about, well, if I'm really going to get into coffee, and at that time I sort of had this purist mentality, which sometimes I fall into that. I like the romanticism of things sometimes. I love the way how things were done in the old days. Like I do have a soft spot in my heart for that. So like I just fell in love with that idea. But yes, electric was, swirling around in my brain and kind of like saying, hey, this is easier in a way, because to get around the propane or the natural gas element, and having to just set it up what we have now, which I'm really happy with right now. But yeah, it did kind of turn my head in the beginning, but ultimately, where I landed up.
Ooh, this is a profile question.
I love these questions.
When you approach a new green bean that you have never roasted before, do you sort of have an idea based off of elevation, region, process, and you kind of start off with a profile that might be similar? Or do you just kind of like wing it and go with your gut as a starting point?
Good question. So I'm going through this all the time because as a new roaster, I'm really interested in just like, ooh, I want to try roasting this new thing or this new thing or this new thing. But as I've been reading and doing a lot more research and really settling into the seat of like, who do I want Black City Coffee to be? And I think when I went through my accident, it really gave me just a different perspective on things. I can't really explain everything right now, but I definitely wanted something of an approach to be more conscious. I definitely wanted my presence in coffee to be conscious. So how I approach new coffees can be done in a couple of ways. I think if I think back to what my pattern has been, I'll tell you this. If I got a new coffee, I would look up the elevation. I would look at sort of like the size of the bean, big bean, little bean, tiny bean, whatever. But mostly, and then I would look at the process. So those were kind of like the three things I would look at. And this is before I read Rayo's book. And if it had a high elevation, I was thinking, hey, I'm going to have to charge kind of high. That's kind of like how I was thinking, in a really simple means of starting off fresh with a coffee. And I would try to write down what my predictions would be based upon this type of coffee. So if I had a washed 1600 meter elevation coffee from Latin America, I'd be like, okay, I think typically these are not, wonky coffees or anything like that. So I would do my run of the mill sort of plan. I'll charge at 380. I'll go to full power. I'll do a 1 minute soak, go to full power. Probably hit turning point around just hitting 2 minutes. I would have maybe a 5 minute dry end or green to yellow transition. Then I'd have like a 3 to 4 minute middle phase, and then a 2 minute last phase. And I would just work from that standard first to see how this new coffee would react to a standard roasting process. And then of course monitor for like, am I getting first crack at 8 minutes, in between 8 and 9 minutes, or what's up with that, right? So I would start there. And then if I had any weird deviations and I look at the ROR, if I'm dipping here, I'm crashing here, then I would go and reassess first my charge. I would first address that and then kind of like work my way down through the chain, because I think the charge really does kind of like set the tone for the rest of the curve, basically, or the rest of the roast and what you're gonna do. And sometimes you come up with something wonky, like the new decaf that I have. It's a high elevation coffee, but it's decaf. So to me, those were like two contrasting terms. It's like, well, decaf is supposed to be roasted slower, or roasted or charged at a lower temperature, like a 350 or something, or a 375 or something like that. And I was like, well, but it's high elevation and the beans are kind of, they're on the larger side. So I was like, I think they're going to need more energy, but it's decaf. But it's decaf. So I stuck with a plan that was like, well, I'm going to charge at 375, but I'm going to come up to full power on it. And I thought that was a happy medium in between that. And that's just how my brain worked out all of those things, and lo and behold, like, it worked for me, right? On this machine in particular. I like to come in with a plan, basically. I don't like to wing it, because then if I go to cup it and say it's great or it's bad, I don't have anything to kind of go off of and be like, well, what happened there? So I always like to have a plan, roast it, cup it. If it's great, if it's good, whatever, look back at the data, reassess, adjust the next plan, and roast again, cup again, and just do that over again. So I just kind of have this feedback loop of hypothesis, test, results, findings, whatever. Okay, reassess, new hypothesis, test, findings, results. Does that make sense? All right.
Okay, this next question is a general question. Dry process coffees. What the hell? Would love to know any tips or tricks you have to taming the dry process beast.
Yeah, it's annoying, isn't it? I'm gonna move away. I think until I'm always tempted to move away from dry process coffees, and the Brazil I have is like, that was kind of, I was like, when I nail that coffee, which is not always, right? And so, I really try to nail that coffee, and when I do, I'm like really proud of myself because you have to manage the heat so much. It just feels finicky, doesn't it? So again, too, like what I just was saying about that weird decaf that I have, it's like, what are the things? Okay, what's the elevation? We know the process is natural or dry. And then how large are the beans? And so if I can nail down a good charge temp, which right now the Brazil is charging at 375. I charge mine at 375. And then I don't come back up to full power after the soak. So for me, my full power would have been 2.5 kPa. I come back up to 2 kPa, which is like 70%, 75%, I guess, after the soak at 0%. And it's just a closely monitoring of the gas coming down as you come up in bean temp. So at 300, I'm lowering. At 325, I'm lowering. At 340, 360, 350, 360, 370, and then I try not to touch it from there. Now, how this Hottop reacts to typical roasting theory like that, it will have to have some sort of adjustment, just because they're different machines. And again, we have that almost 10-second lag time in the Hottop with the heat application. So you kind of have to think 10 seconds ahead and lower the heat, but not too much that you crash your ROR. So it's quite a bit of stuff to be managing with the Hottop, because you're just having to calculate an extra step because of that lack of power, and because of just the limitations of the Hottop. And the Hottop really just, I don't think it was meant to be this scrutinized when it was first created, because obviously when you look at like its automatic settings, like the instructions say to charge like at a really low temperature, like 200 something. And it's basically designed to create baked coffee, right? But we in the coffee world today in 2021, I don't know when the Hottop was made. We're not doing that kind of thing. We're doing high temperatures, and we're trying to get a roast done in a certain amount of time, right? So that we don't bake the coffee, or we don't underdevelop the coffee. There's just some mad limitations with the Hottop. It's still a cool tool, don't get me wrong. I feel like I should have kept mine. I shouldn't have sold it. But we were like, we need everything we can to buy this Mill City roaster. So, Okay, next question.
Okay, this is a Hottop side hustle question, because we know the hot top cannot be used for a business or should not be used for a business. Can you get consistency? If you're roasting and you've got all your variables under control, could you see enough consistency that you were happy with it? Or do you feel like getting that big kid roaster is the only way to get consistency?
Consistency. I would like to know your definition of that. So what I'm getting from that, or what I'm interpreting from your question, is like consistency meaning you have a consistent profile that you can consistently roast time and time again, and most possibly sell that and be content with that. Sure. I mean, you're the owner of your business. You can do whatever the heck you want, honestly. So if you come up with this coffee and you're like, dude, if I do this, and this, and I nailed it, I mastered it, and at some point I felt like I had mastered certain coffees with my hot top, and that I was really confident about selling it online or through Etsy, like where we first started. And then it just got to a point where I was like, I was getting so many orders that I'm not going to sit here for 5 hours and produce 5 bags of coffee. Because at the time I was selling full 1 pound bag coffees. I was just like, I'm not going to do that. I need to be able to scale. But you could definitely do that if it's just like something that you want to do on the side. You don't want to feel like you've wasted time. You want to, put some numbers to your effort and just sell it on the side. I think that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think what maybe the issue is, like, maybe somebody may feel pressured. Oh, do I have to now go get like a Mill City or 1 kg machine or whatever the heck? I feel like if you feel pressured to do anything and it's not really coming from you, there might be an issue down the road a little bit that you'd have to deal with. So I would say whatever decision that you make in coffee, try to have it come from the heart. Try to have it come from a place of what we have in like our businesses is, we call this like, know the why. Why you want to do that, right? And if you can justify your why and it makes sense to you and that's your truth, like, go do that. All right, next question.
Another hot top side hustle question. So at the end of your hot top run, how many pounds a week were you doing? Like 5, 10? At 150 gram batches for us, it's pretty rough.
Yeah, maybe 5. Yeah, maybe 5. But I, at the time I was like, this is sick. I just thought it was the dopest thing. Definitely in the beginning. But towards the end of it, like I was telling you, when it was kind of getting unbearable that I was spending too much time at the hot top, I have this other job that I need to do. And then like, what would suck is like, say if I messed up and I have to go roast it again, because maybe I looked at my phone too long, or I was trying to answer an email while I was roasting, because, sometimes you're just sitting there, right? So sometimes that would happen to me and I'm like, this is not cool. I need a way to be a little bit faster, scale up a little bit. I can't afford anything else right now, anything larger than the 1 kg or anything like that. And, we would have to worry about even more issues about smoke and all that stuff. So I was like, the 1 kg for me was best. And finally when we were done with the hot top, maybe we were doing like 5 pounds a week. Okay, last question.
All right, bonus question. So I know you drink whiskey and I think you prefer scotch, but what's your daily driver whiskey?
So hard now. It's so sad because I have to stay away from alcohol for a minute, like a long one. Preferred whiskey is Japanese whiskey. If I could afford it all the time, it would just be Hakushu, and then Nika from the barrel at night. Hakushu in the day, like in the daytime, at lunch or something like that, in between stuff in the afternoon. And then at nighttime, when we're getting into the nighttime and maybe we're watching a movie, maybe we're at the fireside, it's Nika off the barrel, just a little bit more spice. But that's so cool you're into whiskey. I'd love to know what you're into. We do have a lot of scotch at home, but also my preferred whiskey has always been Japanese. Hey, that was really fun. Thank you so much for sending me those really well produced videos, and I really appreciate how you did that. And you know, people are always like, let me pick your brain and all that stuff, and I'm like, well, you give me something. So thank you, Chris, for giving me that. Like, I hit up Chris, and he's like, hey, can I pick your brain? I was like, hey, can you make content with me? So I'm so glad you rose to the occasion, and it wasn't just like filmed on your phone. It was very highly produced, so I very much appreciate that, so that I don't feel ashamed when I put it next to my content. Because I would feel ashamed if I just like filmed it on my phone, and like I'm trying to send my content to be like alongside somebody else who I know is really passionate. So great job. We'll stay in touch over email, and we'll work together with your very unique Hottop situation, and hopefully we can help solve some of those issues. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that Q&A. That was really fun. If you guys want to do something like that and you send me content like that, I'll answer your question as thoroughly as I can, for sure, because I appreciate that. You know, like hustle recognizes hustle. Like this video if you did, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and we'll see you next time here on Black City Coffee. Bye.